This episode of The Charity Show is brought to you by The Good Studio, creating great content for good causes. This is The Charity Show, the podcast made by charity people for charity people. Every episode, we peel back the curtain on the charity sector to have the honest, sometimes difficult, but always necessary conversations about how we can all do things a bit better. Whether you're a veteran CEO, a new volunteer, or just someone who wants their monthly donation to go further, you're part of a community here that is always striving to do more and learn from others. And today we're going to challenge everything you think you know about how aid, at home and overseas, reaches the ground. If you're joining us for the first time, please hit follow on your usual podcast platform. And if you've been with us for a while, those 5-star ratings are the fuel that keeps our little independent show running. It takes about 5 seconds and helps us reach more people across the sector. Right then, here's what's in store for episode 46.
We have a major event coming up. It combines one thing that I'm really into, which is the music of bicep, and something I'm not too au fait with, high-end Michelin star dining.
Will you get to tuck in, Piers?
I think I will do, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to take a Tesco meal deal or anything, and I'm hoping to get a little bit more than nuggets, but we shall see.
The problem is the UK public give nearly all of the funding to the biggest charities, and the research shows that it's the biggest charities that have the most complex channels of funding. For our partners, they say that every pound they receive from us is 5 times more powerful than a pound that they're told how to spend. So by the time you kind of account for the fact that more of your pound reaches the community level, and you've got that multiplier effect from the flexibility of it, it's calculated that every pound you donate can be up to 40 times as valuable to the community than if you give it to one of the bigger charities.
Welcome back to The Charity Show. I'm Piers Townley.
And I'm Tim Bainer. And Piers, we've been away for a little while. It's good to be back. Haven't seen you since before Easter. How was your Easter break? Are you all good and refreshed? Full of chocolate?
All good. It's full of chocolate, and we've still found some chocolate left in the garage, which is fantastic.
Bonus.
And I've been going by some of the supermarkets that are doing the discounted chocolates to try and get rid of their stock, so it's been fantastic. This year I've just gorged on chocolate. But yeah, really gone really quick. Just been juggling the kids, the Easter holidays, seeing the inevitable kind of family bits and bobs. Yeah, it was good. Waiting for the weather to change, and then full on at the charity. We have a major event coming up on the 5th of May, and it's been in the pipeline for a long time, actually. And it combines one thing that I'm really into, which is the music of Bicep, which is an electronic DJ duo that they are, and something I'm not too au fait with, but is also a big thing on the scene, which is high-end Michelin star dining. And it comes about because two of our supporters, 2 brothers, James and Mark. Mark is a very renowned chef in London, and they've known Matt, who's one half of Bicep, who's also living with a brain tumour diagnosis. And James and Mark, the 2 brothers, sadly lost their parents to a very serious form of brain tumour, come together, and this one-off night is called Sensora. And on the 5th of May, we've got 6 Michelin-starred chefs creating a different dish for each of the senses and a little bit more, telling the story of the charity. And Bicep are going to be there exclusively playing a set throughout the evening. So it'll be kind of an immersive, very much on the line of all these immersive events that are going on at the moment. We've never done it before as a charity, huge endeavour, pulling in loads of pro bono work from all sorts of agency, loads of chefs, some PR, some comms people. So yeah, it's going to be a fantastic fundraiser night. So yeah, so the 5th of May is what we've been working to.
Will you get to tuck in, Piers?
I think I will do, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to take a Tesco meal deal or anything, and I'm hoping to get a little bit more than nuggets, but we shall see. But some of the creations that these chefs have done are just out of this world. That the sort of thing that is put in front of you, you don't really want to touch it because it's like a work of art.
Yeah,
it's like a sculpture.
Nice.
So yeah, I might be dipping into one of those, but I'm there for Bicep, to be honest. I think it's going to be a crazy night, really good night. So yeah, Sensora, 5th of May.
Excellent.
All over our website. So yeah, but that's what, as we were speaking about in some of the episodes recently, it's taken different teams internally, and we're working collaboratively with lots of teams outside of the charity as well. So it's a big fundraising project that's been difficult to navigate, but also amazing to see all the collaboration that's pulled together to support the charity. So fantastic. So yeah, that's been my little bit of PR world, my little bit of media world in the scheme of this wider organisation for this event.
Wow.
How about you, Tim?
Wow. Gosh, no, I haven't got any exciting foodie related things like that on the horizon. Well, a trip to McDonald's maybe, but yeah, it's been an interesting Easter. It's been quite quiet really. I haven't done a huge amount in terms of, we usually go away with the family and stuff over Easter, but we didn't this year. We stayed at home, so it was nice to have a bit of home time, and kids are revising and all that kind of stuff, so they needed to get on with a bit of work. But we plied them with chocolate and trying to encourage them to do some work over the course of Easter. I think it worked. Occasionally, I saw them put pen to paper occasionally. Anyway, yeah, like you, lots of chocolate, lots of food, hot cross buns, all that kind of stuff. So I love this time of year, and it's a nice time of year. The weather's improving a bit. Taking the dog for some nice walks and all that kind of stuff. It is nice. And then on the work front, it's been a really good few weeks actually. We launched a new show called Something to Think About for a third sector fundraising and recruitment agency called Think. They're a consultancy actually, a fantastic organisation. And really lovely people to work with. So we launched their new show, Something to Think About. Brilliant conversation on that show with a lady called Kate Collins, who's a former chief executive of the Teenage Cancer Trust. Fantastic conversation all about change and how charities have to navigate, and some of the challenges they navigate with change. So that's a brilliant listen. And I had an interesting day today, Piers, on another show that I'm working on called In at the Deep End, which is all about swimming. Interviewed with the host of the show, Salim Ahmed, interviewed an amazing lady called Jane Asher. Not the Jane Asher, not cake Jane Asher. This is swimming Jane Asher. Swimming Jane Asher is 95 and a multiple world record breaker. So she broke 5 more world records last month at a swimming meet in Guernsey. And very rarely you meet people who are, I think the word inspirational was bandied around a lot. But, really, when you do meet someone who's truly inspirational in the way that this lady is, it kind of takes your breath away a bit. So I had a fantastic day today meeting Jane, finding out about all that she's done over the course of her life, growing up in South Africa through apartheid and everything, and some of the incredible stories that she had about swimming and where it's taken her, and showing us always medals and trophies and awards that she's won, including a medal from the Queen and everything. Amazing lady. So a very humbling experience personally, and also kind of sort of lovely, sort of life-affirming experience meeting someone who's so full of life at 95. Gives us all hope for the future. I can't moan about my aches and pains when you meet someone like Jane, who's 95 years old and absolutely the life of the party. Amazing lady.
Yeah, we have to get a grip when we start moaning, don't we, really? 95, good grief, that's amazing.
I know, amazing stuff. Now, we often talk on this show about the 95%, the small charities that make up the vast majority of our sector but get a tiny fraction of the headlines. But what if the problem isn't just who gets the headlines, but who gets the money?
Today's guest has spent years as an academic researching exactly that. Niki Banks is a professor at the University of Manchester and the co-founder of One World Together, a social enterprise trying to dismantle the business-as-usual approach to aid.
Niki's research revealed a stark reality. Despite the UK public being huge donors to global development, nearly all that funding goes to the biggest brands with the most complex and often most expensive ways of working.
In part 1, Niki explains the disconnect between massive UK-based headquarters and the communities they serve, and why she believes the current project-based model of charity is actually holding back sustainable change.
We'll also hear about One World Together's approach and the Solidarity Fund, a model that claims to make a single pound up to 40 times more powerful than it would be in a traditional charity.
Here's part 1.
Niki, welcome to the Charity Show. It's fantastic to see you. Thank you for joining us. We were just saying before we hit record how much of a glorious day it is today. The sun is shining for me in Hampshire, for you in Manchester. So it's setting a good scene for today's conversation. So thank you for joining us. Really keen to find out a bit more about all that you do, and especially because this isn't really something ever really talked about on the Charity Show before. So I think it's an interesting area, interesting conversation, interesting crossover between charity and academia that I think we're keen to get a bit more information about. So tell us, you're a professor at the University of Manchester, at the University of Manchester, and you've co-founded a social enterprise called One World Together. I can see it on your jumper. Good bit of branding there. Very impressed. For anyone who hasn't come across it yet, can you tell us what it is and what you're trying to do with it?
Of course. Hi, Tim. Thanks very much for having me. Really nice to be here. Yes, I'm a professional professor at the University of Manchester by day. And for many years, I've been researching the aid and charity sector, particularly in the world of global development. So how we do charity here and how that helps development in all corners of the world. That's been really inspiring research, but also quite difficult research, because the things that we've learned is that charity is not really doing what it sets out to do when it comes to global development. Because we make decisions here, the funding is concentrated here, we design the programs here, regardless of whether or not that's what's right in countries, whether it's Bangladesh, Kenya, Nicaragua. So we launched One World Together 3 years ago, myself and my co-founder, Chibwe Masabo Henry, who'd been working in the charity sector for many a year, with the intention of trying something new, which is just getting money to the community level, to local organizations, whether that's working here in the UK or globally, so that we're connecting public generosity for development directly with the communities that can make real change on the ground. So moving away from this projectization of how we do charity towards just connecting money with communities to try and drive real long-term and sustainable change.
So at the heart of this then, is there a disconnect you feel between headquarters, people working at headquarters in European and UK centric charities, where inevitably those bases are, and the work they're trying to do in small communities in countries around the world? Is there a fundamental disconnect then, do you feel, between those two?
There is, absolutely. And it's of course hard to say there is one way of these relationships working, because it differs hugely as whether you're comparing a big, large, kind of huge brand, the household names that we all know, or whether you're a really small charity here in the UK that works really deeply hand in hand with your partners in one country or one community or just a few communities. We did this really important research, which I think if we hadn't done, would never have made the leap to start One World Together. But it mapped the UK's development charity sector. So we had a list of around 900 charities that worked in global development. We mapped their income over a 5-year period. We mapped where that income came from. And what was really fascinating is that actually it's the UK public that is, I won't say propping up the sector, but is driving that sector. They are by far the biggest donor when it comes to global development, not the government funding, which kind of has really influenced the ways in which charity operates and has driven this projectization of development. But it's the people, it's the yous and the me's that believe in global development as a cause, that want to help lives around the world. We're kind of giving to the tune of £2 billion a year on average before the pandemic. That's changed a lot, as we can discuss later. But there was this kind of moment of realization that the solution is already there. This is not a matter of not having the money. The problem is the UK public give nearly all of the funding to the biggest charities. And the research shows that it's the biggest charities that have the most complex channels of funding, that have the most expensive ways of doing development, that concentrate more of that money, whether it's program specific, more of it here in the UK. So the ways in which we give, which is a matter of trust and branding and profile and sort of presence on the street, we're giving potentially to the less effective charities when it comes to getting our money actually on the ground to the communities making a difference.
So we've talked about this a lot on the show, about the fact that 95% of the UK charity sector is made up of small charities, and it's only the small, it's the 5% that grab all the headlines, as you say. They're the big names and that everyone has heard of, and which dominate the market in terms of donations. Is your research and what you're saying then that actually some of those smaller charities are far better placed in terms of being able to deliver services to local communities around the world, in terms of not having all the baggage that goes with those big organizations?
I would argue that, yes. And again, I'm sure there's a lot of differentiation, but if you're a smaller organization with 1 or 2 or 3 partners, you can have much deeper partnerships. You can get to know them. You can operate on a different level of trust. And it's that issue of trust that translates into kind of equitable partnerships. And the bigger NGOs have so many partners and so many projects and so many donors that they're responding to that it's really hard for them to speak the language of trust. And they have to remain really tightly in control of every penny that's coming through their system. So yeah, I think for me, I would always advocate small charities are the way forward. I think the problem is small charities also don't have the budget and the marketing to have the public aware of what they do. And it's quite often through kind of luck or circumstance or connections that people come across them. And that's really what One World Together is trying to do, is to kind of build a network of incredible community organizations and provide a route through which people can give very small amounts, which we pull together, and we then distribute it to this network of really incredible organizations that people will otherwise very likely never come across, even if they're in your own locality.
Yeah. Okay. I really want to dig into that. I'll find out a bit more about how that works, because it sounds like a sort of fundamentally different model than we're kind of used to in the sector. So I want to find out about that in a second. But tell me a bit about your co-founder as well. So you co-founded One World Together with Chibwe Henry. I'm pronouncing this wrong. I'm sure I am. So you can correct me on this. Tell us about how that partnership came about and what you each bring to the project.
Yeah, no, I'll have a big smile on my face as I speak about Chibwe. I came across Chibwe. We met just before, like about a year before starting One World Together, in something called the Reimagining the International NGO Social Lab. So our worlds had never collided, because at that point I was a really kind of business as usual academic. Chibwe was working for Comic Relief. And then this social lab was an attempt to bring kind of people working for charities, donors, all sorts of kind of actors in the aid industry together to try and answer the question of how can we make this system more equal? And we both joined a working group called Resource Flows, and both of us were interested in this question of the money is there, why can't we get it more directly to communities on the terms that count, which is long-term funding that's flexible and trust-based. So we both just kind of really connected. We wanted the same things. We saw it from very different sides. Mine was the probably less useful, theoretical kind of research-based insight. But Chibwe was the hands-on grant-making experience. She'd been doing this for over a decade. She knew the confines to the system, but there's very little that you can do when you're working in it. You have your project-based frameworks, you've got your MEL frameworks, your reporting requirements. That is the language that you have to speak. So we both brought this real passion to build a system that might work differently. And I think the beauty of it is that we both come from these very different sides, but rooted in the same values. So we became the kind of team that wanted to just do this crazy thing and try something new.
And obviously, she came from Comic Relief as a giant organisation with a huge reach across the world. So I can see how important her experience must have been with that in mind specifically.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me, how does it work in practice? I'm a donor. I want to give £10 a month. I might give that £10 a month to a big, international organisation, or I could give it to you guys. If I gave it to One World Together, how does it work? Tell me what happens to my money. I
think the beauty with One World Together, with what we will do with your £10, is in its simplicity. So we have very deliberately designed a model that is radically transparent. So if you give your £10 to One World Together, 83% of that total every month will go into our solidarity fund. We pool that, and we every quarter just give it to our partners. We split it. We've got 4 partners at the moment. So your money will drive kind of community action here in Manchester. It will support young people in Kenya and Zambia across a range of different programs as well. The other 17% that is kept by One World Together to kind of support our operational costs, and to one day, hopefully as we reach scale, build a financially sustainable model which allows us to stay lean, but also to not find ourselves in this same kind of trap that charities are in, which is the constant search for new funding to keep going. Over time, as we kind of reach that sustainability, we hope that we can increase it even more from the 83-17 down to maybe 90-10. we keep that flexible, but you know that more of your money goes directly to the community level. I think the other really powerful thing about that is that the flexibility of it, you know that the community itself, those 4 communities that are benefiting from your funds, they decide how that money is spent. So for our partners, they say that every pound they receive from us is 5 times more powerful than a pound that they're told how to spend, because they can reallocate it in emergencies, they can invest it in new opportunities, they can use it to fill in gaps. So by the time you kind of account for the fact that more of your pound reaches the community level, and you've got that multiplier effect from the flexibility of it, we've calculated that every pound you donate can be up to 40 times as valuable to the community than if you give it to one of the bigger charities. So we really make every penny of your donation count. £10 would be great. We've also designed a model that says it's not how much you give, it's how you give. So I think we're quite unique as well, because our donations start from as little as £1.25 a month.
So that sounds great, and it's interesting. I mean, we talk quite a lot on the show about micro donations now, and how giving smaller amounts is becoming more popular, especially with young people. And in the cost of living crisis, you can see why that is the case. How does that 83-17 split compare to sort of sector averages for regular giving?
So this is where it gets really interesting and quite murky. So if you go onto one of the big NGOs' websites, they'll quite often tell you where every penny of your pound goes, in theory. So one big household name, for example, will say, for every pound you donate, 40p will hit development programming, 40p will hit humanitarian programming, and 10p will hit fundraising. But there is absolutely no mention of how much of that 40p is spent here in the UK designing, delivering, monitoring, managing partnerships, and how much actually reaches the community level. I think there's a widespread belief that for every pound you give into the aid and charity sector, 10p will reach the community level. I think if you look at the IATI data, it's the International Aid Transparency data, it's about 4.5% of aid reaches the community level. So it's much less than some of these findings might suggest, because people aren't reporting on how much of program funding actually reaches the ground. It's reported in a way that is quite clever, I guess.
Suits the charities. I can totally see that. It's a narrative that they're used to talking about. I totally understand that. Tell me, in terms of reaching community level, give me some examples of the kind of the four core projects you mentioned, and that sort of unrestricted income that's going directly to those community projects. Give us some examples of the kind of projects we're talking about. What are we talking about here?
So we've got 2 partners, one in Kenya and one in Zambia, that are quite traditional NGOs. They both work with disadvantaged young people and support educational outcomes, one through Sports for Development in Zambia and one through a vocational training centre in Kenya. I think what I love about how we're learning the power of solidarity funds through both of them is that the flexible funding makes everything better, because it enables them as organizations to put people before projects. So with their project funding, they have to run the course, they have to kind of keep things going, but they can't treat an individual who's struggling because they've had some health costs that month. They can't help an individual that can't pay for their exam at the end of the project. So the solidarity funds are helping with meals that kind of let kids thrive in the classroom, not just be there. They help with mental health support for young people who come into the classroom from really difficult lives. So again, it's creating an environment that they can thrive. And it helps them respond as individuals in crisis. So in Zambia, they've sort of supported school fees for children with disabilities moving into secondary school. In Kenya, where there's been flooding, they've helped young people with clothes and with money just because they've lost everything in the floods. So it puts humanity at the centre of every aspect of how development works at the community level, which is really, really powerful. The other 2 partners are more community-led social movements. One of them's here in Manchester and one of them's again in Kenya. And interestingly, the Manchester model was actually inspired by the Kenyan model. So it's an example of kind of communities here learning about how communities can lead over there. In Kenya, what I love is it's a very youth-driven movement. So the funds, the young people meet and they decide democratically how to spend that money. They're really interested in climate action. They're really interested in bringing their communities on board with that. So they're investing the funds in youth journalism, kind of painted talking walls, like murals in the community around how to build strong communities and resilient communities. And here in Manchester, the funds support emergency crisis response in some of the savings groups, and has also helped get a kind of an advocacy program off the ground. So responding to these strategic opportunities that arrive before project funding's in place. So they launched the Manchester Social Housing Coalition because that was the number one priority for their members, but there was just no funding to get started otherwise.
Okay, it's time for some news. And first up, this one dropped this week and it's a proper landmark moment, Piers. Not just for one charity, but as a signal of what major philanthropic giving can do for the sector as a whole. Now, the British Heart Foundation has just received, not sure if you heard about this, Piers, it's just received the largest single philanthropic gift in its entire history. The Garfield Weston Foundation, one of the UK's biggest independent grant-making charities, has donated £6 million to help fund the MRC BHF Centre of Research Excellence in Advanced Cardiac Therapies, known as REACT. What's really special about this is what REACT is actually trying to do. The centre is aiming to develop the very first therapies to stimulate heart repair and regeneration in patients following a heart attack and in those with established heart failure, a condition for which there is currently no cure. Over 1 million people in the UK are living with heart failure right now. The centre is a joint initiative between the BHF and the Medical Research Council, with a total planned investment of around £24 million over the initial 7 years. This £6 million donation isn't just the biggest gift in BHF's history, it represents a catalytic early contribution towards BHF's overall fundraising target of approximately £12 million for the programme. BHF Chief Executive Charmaine Griffiths said this gift would allow the charity to go further, faster and be bolder in seeking better outcomes for heart failure patients. And there's a lesson here for the sector more broadly. This donation came about through what sounds like a fairly traditional process. The charity submitted an expression of interest form, which we've all done, which led to meetings and full proposals that were accepted by the grant maker. A reminder that the fundamentals of major donor fundraising still hold true. What an amazing story, Piers. What does a gift of this scale do for a charity's ambitions? What do you reckon? It's a massive sum of money.
Yeah, it's a massive sum of money and a brilliant charity. I love the British Heart Foundation. Love all their comms and their campaigns. It's fantastic. Yeah, that is a transformational amount of money, though.
Absolutely. What about you? What have you spotted in the news this week?
Well, my story this week, Tim, is perfectly timed. It is that time of year for the London Marathon. In just a few days' time, on Sunday, the 26th of April, they estimate 50,000 people will take to the streets of London for the TCS London Marathon. And for the charity sector, this is simply the biggest single fundraising day of the year. I know our office over at the Brain Tumour Charity was buzzing this week as all the merch was coming in. We've got special branded flip-flops for all our runners and all the T-shirts. So I can just imagine that...
Sorry, flip-flops for the runners? What's
not for doing it, but afterwards, Tim, you take those trainers off. You should know this. Okay. You've done a marathon. What's the first thing you want to do is get those blooming trainers off. So we should be having comforts to the feet of all our runners, as all the charities involved. Now, London Marathon participants have helped to raise, this is a staggering amount of money, 1.4 billion for charity since the London Marathon was founded. And last year alone, that total reached a new record. The 2025 London Marathon raised 87.3 million. That's the highest amount ever raised by an annual single-day fundraising event anywhere in the world. Huge numbers. That's just one day, one city, over 87 million pounds. It's a big number again. A record 1,133,813 people entered the public ballot for this year's event, which tells you everything about the appetite to run and the iconic event that it is. The vast majority of people who took part do so with a charity place, committing to a minimum fundraising target in return. And the personal stories behind those fundraising pages, something we know at the Brain Tumour Charity so well, and the reasons run the 26.2 miles are often extraordinary. It's also worth noting that the marathon effects extend well beyond race day itself. The London Landmarks Half Marathon, for example, which took place just last weekend, is expected to raise over 18 million alone just for charities. And it's raised a total of 85 million since it was first run in 2018. Spring really is mass participation season. And for any charity with runners on the start line, they're 26, now is the moment to be cheering them on, sharing their fundraising pages and making sure every pound of their effort counts. And I love watching the marathon. It's one of my favourite events in the third sector, Tim. I love trying to watch all the weird and wacky costumes that people put on. I mean, it's not enough to run, over 26 miles, but to run it with a costume on, it blows my mind. It's incredible.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I did it back in 2019, and every year since I get envious at everyone who's done it. But you're right, everyone who does it in a costume especially is amazing. I remember when I did it in 2019 and I was on the start line chatting to a guy next to me who was in full cricket whites. So he was running them. He had a cricket bat, he had full whites, he had little pads and everything. And I said to him, "Have you trained in that?" And he said, "Yeah, he spent months running around his hometown with cricket pads on." I just imagine this sight of this one guy by himself, because everyone who turns up on the London Marathon, all those 50,000 people, they've all individually been running around their hometowns for goodness knows how long, and a lot of them are doing so in costume. So yeah, there you go. Amazing.
Yeah. My time in working at the Brain Tumour Charity, the two of them stand out. One was an exceptionally inspirational man called Simon Kindlesides, who was paralysed from the waist down, and he walked the distance of the marathon in an exoskeleton, which is just incredible. Raised so much for us.
Yeah, I remember.
And then we had two runners, a husband and wife, who were handcuffed to each other, and the bets were on at the beginning, and they did stay together, and they still were married at the end of the 26 miles. But I can't imagine running it handcuffed to someone else.
No, goodness me, it's tough. For a minute there, I did think you were making all your runners run in flip-flops.
Maybe that's the chance for next year. There's rumours, isn't there, that the marathon's going to be over 2 days next year, so maybe there's more opportunity for this.
Wow. Do you know what? There is a world record. I did see a world record somewhere along the lines for someone who did run it in. There is a world record for people running it in Crocs.
Oh,
I don't know about flip-flops.
No, flip-flops is too far, too much.
Welcome back to our conversation with Niki Banks from One World Together. In part one, we heard that as little as 4.5% of international aid actually reaches the community level because of the various layers of middlemen that inevitably get involved.
In this second half, we get into the how. How do you actually monitor impact when you stripped away the 40-page project frameworks and the rigid KPIs that big donors demand?
Niki explains their concept of relational monitoring, where the strength of the partnership matters more than the number of workshops held.
We also hear about One World Together's work on the ground, from the climate change shakers in Kenya to the social housing action campaign in Manchester.
And we discuss why a monthly donation of just £1.25 isn't just a micro gift, but a building block for long-term unrestricted funding.
Let's get back to the conversation.
How does it work in terms of checks and balances? So if you're sort of stripping away some of that red tape that goes, that some of those bigger name charities, some of that, the percentage of that pound goes towards some of that management of ensuring the money goes to where it needs to go to and it's spent in the way that they say it's going to be spent. What if this is sort of taking away some of that red tape? What checks and balances are in place to make sure that the money is spent in the way that those community-led causes and projects actually say they're going to spend that money?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think what is the main difference is that our impact is defined by communities. So there's no reporting on whether you've spent it as you promised, because there's no kind of, I'm going to spend it on this. Our impact, we define kind of relationally, and we monitor relationally. So every quarter we connect with our partners, we ask how they've spent the previous quarter's money, and we ask how things are going and how they might spend the next quarter's money. But it's a process of, we see it more as of learning than accountability. And the process is about capturing the stories of how powerful flexible funding is, so that we can show that we can know that as an organization, the money is being spent well, that we've done our due diligence, but also that we can show our supporters quite how powerful their donations are. Because when you see quite how powerful tiny amounts can make when you get it in the right hands, it creates this virtuous cycle. It moves away from, oh, I don't know how my money's spent, to, oh my gosh, look what my £10 a month is doing in the hands of these incredible organizations. So we take a very different approach, which I think is our strongest approach. Coming from an academic perspective, it's learning that drives us as much as the outcomes. Like, that's the bit that gets exciting. Like when we speak to our partners every quarter and we hear how, I mean, the money we're giving at the moment is relatively small compared to the project-based funding. But for our partners, they say it's the most important funding they have because it comes with dignity and respect and this recognition that they know what's best. And the amount that they emphasize that highlights how unique it is, as in that is so far from the norm, when many of us might think that the charity sector does work a bit more in this direction, but it really doesn't.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And I think we have a lot of conversations on this show about impact, about how charities report on impact, how they talk about impact, and how they pass that back to donors. And a lot of charities really struggle with that. They churn out an impact report every year and they fill it full of stats about the amazing work they've done, and they scatter it with stories from beneficiaries and service users and things like that. How do you take a different approach in terms of reporting back to your donors with impact? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I think for us, and I think it matches a wider trend in the sector that recognizes storytelling is the way forward.
Yeah.
I think people, and I mean, so people as in you and me, the everyday people that support causes, are not interested in the metrics. And in fact, it's much easier to doctor metrics than it is to bend the truth when you're having a conversation with somebody that you really value. So it's actually, we think of it as the gold standard of reporting, but actually it's not the right one, particularly if it comes from a place in which we as the donors are telling the organization what metrics count. So you miss what the communities need anyway. So for us, it's about storytelling. I think one of the, I won't say problems isn't the right word, but one of the challenges we've faced is that we're a new organization that spent at least the first year without any impact because it was something brand new. The organizations, the partners we were supporting didn't have stories for change yet. So we were trying to bring people on board with an idea and the background challenges without this kind of really rich learning and insight into what the partners are doing with the money. So we're only just getting to the stage where these stories are coming out. And now we have so much, we just don't have the capacity to make the most of it, which is our other big challenge as a tiny, brand new organization. But yeah, that is where people connect. That is where the magic happens. And having spent yesterday on the streets of Manchester talking to young people about the CAF Giving Report and why people feel so disconnected from charities in the UK right now, that's what will bring people back, I believe, is seeing the power and the magic of change happening and feeling like you're doing something, even if it's through something simple as donating £1.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the CAF report. Obviously it's shocking to a degree in terms of seeing the drop off in giving across the country. Obviously, there's a whole plethora of reasons behind that. One thing they did pick out in that report, and you mentioned it earlier on, is the importance of trust. When it comes to giving, and people need to be able to trust the organisations they're donating to. Do you feel, and with your sort of academic hat on, that trust is eroding a bit in the sector? And is this an alternative for those people who perhaps are becoming distrustful of bigger organisations?
I think it's a massive problem, and I think it goes hand in hand with the fact that we have such a top-heavy infrastructure. So all of if 90% of the public's fund goes to the biggest charities, those are the ones that represent what charity is to that big average public. And that part of the sector has also been hit by scandals, hugely repeated scandals amongst the the biggest names, some of them hitting the same organizations over and over again. Those headlines count. And sadly, for the rest of the sector, who will not have been subject to any of these scandals, if your beliefs about the charity sector are dependent upon these big ones at the top who you donate to, then that's your impression of the concept of charity deteriorated, whether or not that reflects the whole sector. So I think it's a massive problem. And I don't think it's a generosity crisis. I think it's a trust crisis, which is to a certain extent the sector's doing. And by the sector, I generally would be meaning those bigger organizations that haven't had to work very hard. So if you look at the global development charity sector, all of the big charities came together for the Make Poverty History campaign. Was that like 50 or 20 years ago? And they had a massive victory of kind of meeting the 0.7% commitment, at which point money flooded into the sector. So they didn't have to they brought the public along with them to help reach that victory, but then they almost didn't have to try so hard beyond that to keep us part of the solution, because so much more government funding came into the sector. And I think we're seeing the damage of that now, that more money has actually just created more problems, and it's created more distance between the public and the charity sector. And we need something new, which is where I guess One World Together is coming in. Like we came in with these, not even seeing a crisis of generosity, we saw a crisis of trust. We saw that the public funds are the solution to this crisis of a system that doesn't work for community level development, and wanted to find a way to connect more of that with on the ground communities. But it also answers these questions around trust with our kind of radically transparent ways. It answers the questions of affordability, given that we don't see £1.25 as a gimmick. We see that as actually that's enough to make a difference, even if that's all you can afford. So yeah, I do think we just need an alternative.
Definitely, I can totally see where you're coming from, and I completely agree. And reading through that report and seeing some of the statistics and some of the information around the crisis in trust, as you called it, it is shocking. But you can see why it happens and how it's happened, and how negative headlines linked to big name charities cause issues for the whole sector. And it's the small charities that suffer, and then consequently it's the community-led initiatives that suffer as a result as well. So
yeah, and you have to factor into that. Because I think the latest CAF report also shows that global development charities have been hit particularly hard by individual giving, but that's on top of an aid crisis in which aid budgets around the world have been slashed. I saw something today that said nearly half of all Ugandan NGOs have closed in the last 2 years. Like, what happens here has massive repercussions, even more massive repercussions, because job layoffs here might be less damaging than job layoffs in other parts of the world. So it's a double whammy of a crisis.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned £1.25. It's a very specific number. Why £1.25?
Yes, no, it's very random, but actually just it's part of the radical transparency. So the 25p is the transaction cost. So
okay,
of that £1.25, £1 of it is coming to One World Together and its partners.
Okay, that makes sense. I get it.
Otherwise, it's harder to say, well, 83% minus the transaction fee, and so it's kind of this way of making us all realise exactly where our money goes. Yeah,
I get it. Okay, so I think I'm right in thinking that One World Together is 2 years old. Is that right?
We are just entering into our 4th year.
Oh my goodness me, I'm completely wrong.
Yes, brand new. I think that's maybe my fault. When you turn a year older, it takes you a year to catch up.
well, congratulations on turning 4. And what's the plan in terms of, I totally see where you're coming from. The aims and objectives of the organisation, fantastic. How do you now make sure that you, apart from coming on shows like this, which we're delighted to have you, how do you rise above the noise? How do you make sure that everyone finds out about it?
Now you're asking, Tim, because that is our number one question. And we realised very quickly that it was going to be very hard. And I think we naively thought before we got started that everyone was waiting for a new alternative and members would come flooding in since we designed such an affordable, brilliant way of giving. but it doesn't work like that because everyone, I think part of the problem is also not everyone knows there's a problem. So you're kind of having to do two things, which is bring people into a new idea while also talking about the problems. And we are working in a context in which we have very limited resources and very limited staff capacity. So we're just trying to take it one step at a time, looking for funding as many organizations are, but the marketing and the kind of digital kind of aspect of what we're doing. I think what we've learned quite quickly is that we're going to struggle with a model that has a really kind of high digital marketing budget, and that actually where our magic happens is kind of in-person events, which is probably a lot slower, but that is going to be core to what we do going forwards, is kind of trying to make organic spaces for people to connect, learn. We're overthinkers, which probably comes from our academic background, around kind of getting the messaging right that is honest and dignified without falling into the trap of what works. Because it's much easier to get people on board if you're talking urgency, if you're talking kind of desperation, if you're talking about like the old way of doing things.
This is the cliched way of the charity's done it for decades, forever.
Yeah. Whereas what we're doing is something very different, which is come and build a better future, which people will go, oh yes, I want to be part of that. But then they'll forget and not join us until 6 months has passed, which is fine. It's never too late, but it doesn't have that sense of I must act now. So we're always coming back to that question of our values and how we do this. So I think it's probably just a slower journey than we expected, and we haven't got it all figured out yet. But we hope also people spread the word when they find out about us. And
absolutely. That
we grow naturally that way. But it's still a work in progress.
Well, listen, we'll put all the links and everything in the show notes so people can find out all about One World Together in the show notes. Go to the show notes, click on the link, find out everything you can. Give your £10 a month. That's the call to action for this episode. But let's assume that everything does go to plan and that the marketing and everything is successful. 2 years time, 10 years time. What's the ambition?
So I would like to say I'll say 5 years time, because I think everything is slower than we thought. So I think in 5 year time, we would love to be a financially sustainable organisation that is getting tens of thousands of pounds to maybe around 10 partners. So we'll have expanded the amount of money we're giving to our 4 partners and then built into more and more partners. Our grand plan, which I think we see as our 30-year plan, is that we would love to get 1% of the UK's working age population donating £1 a month. I think our average donation is £8 a month. And at that point, we would be unlocking, I think, £20 million a year in funding for communities, alongside the money that One World Together would be kind of using to sustain itself, potentially growing in other parts of the world. That is transformational. Even if we can go from the thousands to the tens of thousands to the hundreds of thousands in completely unrestricted and long-term funding, that's transformational. So yeah, we're a very small organization with very big ambitions. We don't want to grow for the sake of us. We want to grow because our growth is about growing a movement of real community-led change, which can only improve this world that we are living in right now.
Fantastic. Well, best of luck. It's a fantastic initiative, a fantastic operation, and we're super excited to see where it goes. So keep in touch. I'm going to invite you back in 5 years' time, and you can tell us how it's gone.
How we got there.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to you having smashed those targets out of the water.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Niki. Thank you so much for today. It's been absolutely brilliant. It's been a fantastic conversation, and it's been a pleasure to meet you. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Tim. It's been great. I appreciate it.
Now, we usually spend our time talking to experts and leaders of big organisations, but as Niki reminded us today, the real heart of the sector is found in the communities that are often overlooked.
So we want to give a platform to those smaller organisations, the ones running on trust, passion and very thin and tight margins. This is the section where we move from the boardroom to the grassroots.
Yes, this is the Small Charity Spotlight. If you're a small team doing big things, we want to hear from you. Email us at TheCharityShowPod@gmail.com. And first up this week, we heard from Harriet Marsh, who told us, and this is her words, I'm going to read directly from her message bit. She says that she's proud to run From Me to You, a gorgeously simple charity that sends over 15,000 letters every year to cancer patients in the UK and a few abroad, in a bid to ease the loneliness and isolation that they so often feel. Donated by writers from around the world, the letters provide a welcomed distraction from treatment and or recovery, she says. In some cases, they are a lifeline to the recipient, helping to keep them connected to a world outside of their cancer. Kindness, she says, in its rawest form. And she's got a little pink icon of a letter there with a heart on it. So yeah, absolutely couldn't agree with you more. What a fantastic idea, Harriet, and good luck to you with From Me to You. We'll put the links in the show notes.
I think that's a brilliant initiative that we were just talking actually offline before we got onto the podcast about how no one writes letters anymore, and how kind of a personalized letter, a personalized sentiment, personalized story, how powerful that is. I think that's a really, really unique and lovely initiative. It's a short and sweet but very impactful charity that's been highlighted from me this week. It's Elsa's Aim. I do hope I've said that right. They're a beautiful charity. It says in the notes that we sent to us, a beautiful charity supporting cancer and neonatal patients with essential care packs. It's run by people who have been patients of both around the country. So a fantastic charity there, supporting cancer and premature birth families. Elsa's Aim. And we'll put the notes and the links into the show notes as well, as Tim says.
Two more brilliant organisations doing vital work with limited resources and enormous heart. And don't forget, if there's a small charity you think we should feature, drop us a line at thecharityshowpod@gmail.com or use the link, as we've already said, in the show notes. And that's it for episode 46. A huge thank you to Niki Banks for being so refreshingly honest about the flaws in the global aid system and for showing us there's a different way to do it.
All the links to One World Together and the research that Niki mentioned are in the show notes. And if today's episode made you look at your donate button a little bit differently, tell us about it. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely. And don't forget to follow us so you don't miss our next conversation in a fortnight's time. Details coming very soon on LinkedIn. Until then, keep doing the work, keep making a difference, and we'll see you next time on The Charity Show.